Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar on abstracts and key words. Just to verify, could you please virtually raise your hand if you can hear me? I want to double check, make sure you can all hear me. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so there are a couple things that I'd like to do in this webinar, and one of them is go over what we probably all already know pretty well, with the purpose of just generating um, a basic slideshow we can use to share this knowledge with people who are who want to learn how to write a good abstract in English. And then the second thing is to test out keyword searches to show a little bit about how useful they can be if you pick the right ones, and to look at some abstracts that are available online that are relevant to the kind of things we're studying in this course. So let's start with the first task. I'm gonna okay, and then now what have we learned, or what do we know so far about abstracts? What is an abstract in terms of academic writing? Would anyone like to share their understanding of an abstract? Okay, thank you. Leonel, how would you define an abstract in academic writing?
Yeah, I believe I would define an abstract as an invitation for academics to take a look into your article.
Okay.
Basically, an easier way to look into your article before actually reading it. You know how many articles could be up to like 20 or more pages. So maybe
Exactly.
you wouldn't want somebody to be reading like up to page 13 and then finding out, wait, this is not what I needed. So the abstract kind of, well, it tells you this is what you will find in this article, and this is what this article is for. So therefore, you can decide upon doing your research. This might be something I want to look at or not.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Thank you. That's a great way to describe it. It is a summary of the content of your text or article. It should indicate to potential readers whether the text is relevant or of interest to them. Okay? So I've told graduate students this numbers of times when they're working on their theses, and undergraduates too, that if they pick a topic that has a lot of work published on it, there are going to be thousands upon thousands potentially things for them to read, and um, rather than just sit down and try and read everything, it's good to go through and look at the abstracts and see if some of those things have more relevance than others, and then read the ones that seem most relevant. So it can save a lot of time. It takes a lot less time to read a paragraph than it does to read 20 pages. So exactly. And sometimes when you read the um, whole article, maybe it's not a well-designed study. Maybe it seemed at first like it was relevant, and it turns out not to be. Um, there's all kinds of things you can figure out from the abstract before you spend the time reading an article that may or may not actually be um, relevant. Okay. Now, there are two types of abstracts. Okay. Well, maybe you could even say there are more than two types, but let's. Dana Driscoll wrote a piece on the Purdue OWL, and she divides abstracts into one of two types. Um, there's the expressive abstract and the descriptive abstract. Okay, so in one type of abstract, and you can call it what you'd like. Uh, okay, so there's one type that you would use, for example, for a proposal. Let's say if you wanted to propose to um, your an administrator at your university that you start an academic writing center or that you start a program of academic writing courses, you might write up a proposal. The proposal might have um, a statement of need. It might have some commentary on what kind of resources and costs would be involved with setting up the writing center. And it might project plans for developing and the writing center over the next several years, and then a conclusion. So the type of abstract you would write for that, it may also be called an executive summary. And it would simply say what's going to be in the proposal. And in that sort of environment, you don't need to say much more than what's going to be in it. And you don't need to say what in the abstract, what the costs are going to be or what the plans actually are. Okay, and the purpose of that type of abstract is not to get them to determine whether or not to read the proposal or the report. It's just to give them a primer on what they're going to find there when they do read it, right? That's the kind of abstract you would write if you were 100% certain that the person you're writing it for or the committee you're writing it for is going to read the report anyways. And so it has a slightly different purpose. The type we use for academic articles is a little bit different, right? Because that's for an audience who will definitely want to know whether they should read it. Let me write that in here. Okay, so the descriptive abstract is written for an audience who is seeking to determine whether to read the text or not. Okay? Typically used for academic articles, books, dissertations, etc. Okay, so we're going to focus on the descriptive abstract. Okay, what kind of traits should the descriptive abstract have? What do you think? What would you want if you were looking for an abstract, or if you were looking through abstracts while doing your research? What would you want to know? What would you want the abstract to have in it? Okay, thank you. Vera.
Hello, everyone. Well, what I would be looking at is whether the abstract, well, it's not just whether it's related to the topic, but whether the kind of methodology that it employs responds to my needs. For example, I would like to see whether this particular article employs specific methods that I'm interested in using, as far as, for example, or using corpora in language learning is concerned, or some other purpose, such as, for example, using technology to teach languages. So I would be looking for methods and how they're described, how data analysis was done. Maybe I would be interested in learning what specific procedures were used, because this is usually, well, usually in most abstracts, this is mentioned when, data sources, what participants were employed, recruited for the study, and, well, some preliminary results. For example, if I am interested in teacher education and the use of technology in educating teachers, such as pre-service teachers, for example, I would be interested in whether there's a specific category mentioned, such as, for example, pre-service teachers using technology. Well, I'm just giving this as an example. So
Well,
an abstract, while being short, actually in concise, has to include all those important features, such as, the purpose of the study, the methods employed, procedures for data analysis and data collection, participants, and preliminary results. And for me, I would be specifically interested in learning about the pedagogical implications of specific tools described in the article. So pedagogical implications of whatever, well, implications of the research findings are important. And if those are included in an abstract, to me personally, of course, it depends on the field, that would be a sign that that is a nice article to look at, that which I will be doing next after reading the abstract.
okay, thank you, Vera. That's a good answer, um, and it's definitely uh, well contextualized within the example topics that you mentioned. So let's make some general rules out of that. What I'm getting from Vera lines up with what I believe also about abstracts, and that is that it should include a summary of every single important part of the article. Um, so let's say I'm making this a little more general than Vera's answer was, just because um, not all articles are going to have all of the same things in them. Like if you were to do research into literary history, um, a lot of times there's no methods section or uh, explicitly stated. The method has to be kind of ascertained from the article, and then not every article has a literature review. Um, and but some do. So, but the main idea to make a general rule out of this is that every single important part of the article needs to be summarized in the abstract. And this is where the descriptive abstract and the expressive abstracts really differ. Like it's, and I've had people who are well published and have written a lot, and they've confessed to me that they feel reluctant to put the results of their uh, research in the abstract, even though um, and, and even though that's necessary. It just seems like uh, you might tease the reader more into reading your article in order to find out the results. But the way that academic articles often work, and again, it'll depend on your field, and it'll depend on what kind of research you're carrying out. But oftentimes, it's not the results that are most important, it's the methods. So if you put your results in your abstract, that will get the reader's attention. And if the methods in the abstract look like they are sound, then they'll want to go, they may want to read your article more closely to really think about your methods. Because if you come out and say something like, well, here's an example. This actually happened I think they were in Colorado. These quantum physicists modified a sort of classic experiment where in quantum physics where you filter light in order to determine whether light consists of particles or waves. Okay, so they reconstructed this classical experiment, but they modified it, and they found out that light is either both a particle and a wave, or neither. And in fact, the results of their experiment suggest that the way that you interact with something in the present moment actually changes what it was in the past. So light would have been a particle in the past if they interacted with it a certain way, or it would have been a wave in the past if they interacted with it in a certain way. So the way they filtered the light changed what it was in the past, and that goes against all logic. So when you hear that result, the first thing a scientist is going to say is, I really want to understand how it is you came to that conclusion, because it goes against, intuition, it goes against logic, and it is fascinating if it's true, right? So don't be reluctant to include the results in your abstract, right? Because we're not writing a detective novel, and this isn't a mystery. You want the results. That's going to be one of the most enticing things about the abstract. It's going to be the results. Say maybe. Yeah. So almost the main point of the abstract is to share the results and to summarize how you got to those results so that the reader can decide whether to read about your methods and your other things, in your literature and your other research more closely. Okay? So it also helps to think about how people read articles. Let's make one more slide. Okay, so how do you read an article? When you read an article, what do you do? Julia.
Hello, excuse
Hello.
me, but can we come back just a little bit to the previous slide? I just have a
Yes.
question. Speaking about results and methods and all these things which were enumerated, if we go to Purdue Online Writing Lab again, we'll see that Driscoll also mentioned recommendations. What's that, recommendations? Because how can you explain? What kind of recommendation should we include? Is that an essential component of an abstract?
Recommendations for like further research?
Yeah. Because
Yes.
enumerating this course, yeah, she also mentioned these things.
If you write, it depends on the type of research you're doing, but if you are doing the sort of research which many of you actually are, in fact, Yulia, I think your article in this course would be this type of thing, where you're doing a study that essentially indicates trends or indicates needs or indicates methods that might work. But if for example, you need a larger sample size, but you've got some good data and you want to write an article anyways, or if you need a control group and to do the study more thoroughly, but you don't have one now, but you're still getting results that you can make claims about, then you may conclude your article with recommendations for further research, or, sometimes an article is just about doing that. Sometimes an article is about saying, look, here's the research we've already done, and here's what we've learned from it, and what we have learned is compelling enough for us to think that we should continue looking at these types of things and set up further studies into the same sort of research questions that we have, enhanced by the new questions that have come out of these results. So a lot of times it's possible, or even a good idea, to conclude, and I guess you would put this in your discussion section if you're following the MRAD format, but to end the article with sort of a vision of future research or recommendations for carrying out further research, right? Because, remember, your article and your methods and your data, your article has to basically explain your methods and work with the data you have. And your claims just have to be restricted to what really can be deduced from the data you've acquired. And if it indicates that more research is necessary, then yes, you should conclude with recommendations for further research, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, I see.
And so yes, if that's part of your article, it needs to be in the abstract. The key here is that any major point you make in the article has to be summarized in the abstract, right?
So it mostly depends on the type of the article, right?
Yeah, see, not all articles are going to have all of the same types of components. Like, not every article, especially in the humanities, you're not going to have a specific section that has a literature review. In a humanities article, in like an article about, Pushkin or something, the author will often engage other literature by other scholars throughout the article, just based on when it's relevant to a certain point in the analysis of the text and so forth. So you won't have a lit review section in a lot of literary studies, or methods section, or results section. You'll have a sort of looser format, but all the main points still need to be summarized. If you do have these sections, they need to each have their own summary, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Vera, you have a comment?
Yes, I think that I could just share some of my impressions about writing articles and abstracts for them. I think that, one important consideration is that the abstracts are pretty short, and they should be written within a certain limit. And why it probably depends on the author a lot. What I want to say is that it depends on what emphasis should be put on what. I think that sometimes if you want to make your study look stronger by describing methods more, that's one way to do it. If you want to focus more on the recommendations that you want to propose for the future researchers that are going to contribute to the same topic, to the same body of knowledge on the topic, then recommendations part could be given more space. It's just that it's important to strike a balance between how much space you give to each one of these specific elements of an abstract. And sometimes recommendations are important, and they can take up the space of maybe one to three sentences. And maybe if we're talking about research on foreign language education, in which it is very practical in a lot of cases, well, the kind of studies that I deal with are very practical, and they are the studies which are basically about what implications should be drawn from the results of a study. That's why it is important to basically understand, what emphasis to put on what you say in the implications part, and maybe to just briefly, so the implications part can be either detailed or less extended. For example, with some fields which I know about, for example, business studies, Sometimes it's just enough in the recommendations part to write, the kind of policy, the kind of parties that will benefit from the study, for example, policymakers, specific marketing specialists, and so on. While with foreign language education, you might want to outline specific things that teachers want to know about to appreciate the results of your study before they start reading it. So the
Yes.
recommendations part, I mean, it is there, but sometimes it's just a sentence which says, well, the study, some important pedagogical considerations can be drawn from the study. That's it. And that's where that's a signal that, you should go further and look into the article itself to come up with whatever suggestions you feel are important for you. Or they can give specific recommendations that would signal to the readers, whether the study is important, whether it does, whether the discussion part, for example, does offer important solutions, how some of the questions that you've raised were addressed in the study, and so on.
Yeah. Thank you. Those are some really good points. And I think the key thing that Vera said that we really need to include here is that not only should what you include in the abstract be correspond with what's in the article, but the actual emphasis of what you emphasize in the abstract should also correspond to what gets the most attention in the article. So if the main point of the article is coming up with recommendations for further research, then that's going to be the thing that you should emphasize in the abstract. If the main point of the article is the result or the results of the study that you've done, then that's what needs to be emphasized the most in the abstract. One other thing that I forgot to point out, and I'm glad Vera made her comments because it touched on that as well and reminded me, is that the sequence of the abstract should reflect the exact sequence of information as it appears in the full text. Okay, so not only should you follow these three key rules: one, include every main point and summarize all your main points and all your data. Everything that's in the article needs to be summarized in the abstract. The emphasis in the abstract needs to correspond to what you've emphasized the most in your article. And third, all of this has to be done in the exact same sequence that it appears in your article. So if you have three major claims about your data and you present them as, in the sequence X, Y, and Z, then they need to be in that same sequence when you summarize them in the abstract. So your abstract really should be, just imagine if you could take your article and shrink the everything down to a paragraph and still have it say everything the article tries to say, just without as much detail, then your abstract should look exactly like your article. Your reader should be able to look at your abstract and say, okay, the author introduces the problem and the claims and makes these claims. The author then summarizes what literature has said about the topic. Then the author explains her methods and then the results and then recommends further research. That should all be in the same sequence in the abstract, and someone reading your abstract should know exactly how you've organized and structured your article just from reading the abstract, right? Okay. Anything else about this before we talk a little bit about keywords? I'm going to forget about the sorry. Yeah. No. Now let's get back to how do you go about reading an academic article? it sounds like a trick question, I guess, but I'm not so sure everyone reads them the same way. And I think editors might read them differently from how other scholars read them. So what do you do when you sit down and do research and you start looking up others' published material on your topic? How do you approach that material? What's the first thing you do? Okay, um, Yulia.
Well, of course, before reading any academic article, I start with reading an abstract. And it's obvious that I pay attention to the vocabulary which is used in the abstract, because every scholar has his or her own research, right, and is interested in something specific. So that's why if I see those keywords which express some ideas which are important or relevant for my research, I take this abstract as something important and then proceed to the article itself. So I think that vocabulary is pretty important for reading an abstract, for getting the main essence of the abstract and then proceeding to the article.
Okay, great, thank you. Now, Yulia, when you get to the article, what do you read first?
Well, first, of course, I try to follow their organization of the material, the way the material is really presented, the way it is organized, how many sections there are in the article, and then when I start reading, I pay attention to the paragraphs, and to be more exact with the main idea of the paragraph and how these ideas are expressed and developed in the article.
Okay, great, thank you. Um, I would say that's typically what I do, but um, it depends on what kind of article it is, first of all. But sometimes uh, I do this, and sometimes other readers will do it, and definitely editors will do this from time to time. And that is read the introduction, read the conclusion, and then um, stop there and decide whether to read anything else. So, in fact, we're going to talk about introductions and conclusions soon in this course, and one thing that's probably the two most important things to write, to have well written before you submit are your abstract and your introduction. Because if an editor sits down and starts to read your introduction and it's not a well-structured, well-written introduction, that editor might not even read any further. You might get a desk rejection, might not even send it out for review, right? So if an editor gets past your introduction, then they may read your results and then your methods. In other words, not all readers are going to read your article in order. Okay. So when you pick your keywords, you want to make sure that you're getting things that are going to reflect all of those different sections in a way that is engaging to your readers, right? So Okay? So, in other words, you don't want to just pick keywords that are only indicating the subject matter, right? You might want to add a keyword that indicates your methods or something as an extra hook to get people more interested in the various different aspects of your article, right? Um, Now, in terms of picking keywords, what else might we do when picking keywords? Well, let's think about this. The keywords are also going to let people know whether they want to read your article, right? But the abstract is going to help with that too. Um, but what else do keywords do? Vera.
Well, I think that keyword should be, well, while we do care about the novelty of our work, how original it sounds, and, the specific things that we're doing in our studies, what I feel is also important is to include keywords, and I think that these should be predominant. The keywords which are of general nature, which show generally, what specific subdiscipline or sub area of the topic that we're researching, we're addressing. I had there was a point once when I was reviewing a paper for a journal. Actually, it was a foreign journal, and I was really surprised how the authors were discussing something throughout the whole article, and yet their choice of keywords was very strange. They never included anything that they were basically exploring in their article, and they chose what was to me a little off point, a little not strictly connected to their research topic as their keywords. And when the readers start looking at their paper, they don't really appreciate. Well, they cannot appreciate the original results of the study unless the keywords reflect that. So, speaking generally, it's important that your keywords do reflect both the essence of your work and what it adds to the general research in your topic area, but also, some general things so that people can connect it to kind of more general aims of their research, because all of us are all within a specific, broader area, and we need to identify how your smaller study and the smaller scale goals align with larger goals and larger some larger sub areas that people should be aware of. I don't know
Yes.
if it makes sense. I know that I may sound a little confusing. This may
No,
sound a little confusing, but I don't know. Maybe it does make sense.
it makes sense to me. That I think to summarize what you said, thank you. That makes perfect sense. To summarize what you've said, you don't want your keywords to be too specific to the minor details in your text. You want them to connect your main ideas to general topics or areas of study, right? So, um, so that people can see where your research kind of fits into the field. And as we thinking about that, it's important to remember that one main function of keywords is to help readers find your text. So if somebody's searching for research on a certain topic, and now I want to add one more point here, and then I want to actually test this out with you guys. If someone's looking for research on a certain topic, keywords are going to be able to are going to help them find other articles on that same topic. So you want to select keywords that are going to help people find your article. And therefore, it can help to think of keywords as hashtags. Do y'all know what hashtags are? I'm sure you probably do, but in internet speech, people will put a pound sign and then a word on Twitter, and everybody who puts that hashtag in their tweet can have their tweet show up if somebody searches for the hashtag, right? So keywords existed before in Twitter or Facebook or anything like that, but they work kind of like the way hashtags work, and that's one of their main functions. So words that you might use to search for published research on your topic. Okay, so I think Vera's point was excellent, that the actual quality of a keyword should be somewhat general enough to put your work in the context of a certain subject area, and yet specific enough to give readers an idea of what kind of content is in your article. You don't want keywords that don't actually reflect your main ideas. Okay, so let's do this. Let us look at let's do a search. So would somebody like to share the topic of their article, and we'll do a search and see if we can find some keywords and abstracts of research that's published on that topic. Anna, are you there? Is your microphone working? All right. Natalia.
Yes, hello. Right, so actually, this would be really lovely if we could take a look at the search of the abstracts in my field that I'm currently working in. So I'm currently interested in any research texts which are about how people write research papers in the history of art. So this particular discipline, because I
Okay,
have been really struggling here to search for something.
you're analyzing how people write
Research articles in one particular disciplinary field, yeah.
in a particular field. And so you want to look and see if anyone else has done research
Yeah.
on that particular topic, the same type of topic you're working on. Let's see. Now that's really, yeah, that's a tough one. What would you search for then? What word would you use? I'm looking at Compile right now, and I've mentioned Compile in earlier webinars. It's a great site. It is mainly, it's a database of things that have been published from 1939 till now. But it's all around like writing, studies, composition, pedagogy, and things like that. So there may be some studies in this database that are relevant to that, but I'm not sure. We can look. What terms would you use, though?
I would go for history of art.
All right, so we've got we can search by author, title, date, book, journal, pages, glossary term, or annotation. Let's see.
Yeah, that's quite tricky because sometimes when I think about research text, I would often have a title and I would have keywords which are not the same.
All
So I
right,
don't
here
know
we
about research, yeah.
Sorry. I just put in art history in under annotation
Oh, yeah, I see.
because that means it's going to look just for those words in the abstracts themselves. The problem with that is if some journals don't require abstracts, it might not pull that up. But the other problem is if you look for art and history in the title, you might also not get some relevant results, or because it would have to appear in the title. So you can do the search more than once. But when you search for art and history in the annotation, you come up with this first one by Paul Tucker, Evaluation in the Art Historical Research article published 2003 in the Journal of English for Academic Purposes. That sounds exactly like the type of thing you said you were looking for. So what we do now is we look at the keywords that he used and the abstract that he used. Right now, first we read the abstract, and he says the paper attempts to isolate the aspects in which the evaluative language typical of research articles within art history differs from that in other fields. Okay, so that sounds like what you said you want. It sounds like it's relevant to your research. It might not be the
Yeah,
same.
absolutely. Thank you.
So here we have the keywords he picked: historiography, art history, research article, article writing, systemic functional linguistics, text analysis, data cross-disciplinary, social constructivist, predicate, preposition, evaluative. Now look at those keywords. And it was kind of like Vera was saying, some of these are really general. Art history is extremely general, right? But some of these are very specific, like preposition and predicate. I mean, you're getting a cross-section in these keywords, of specific things he's going to be looking at in the article, along with very general topic areas to which it has some sort of relevance. See? Let's see. That looks like the only one that, looking at the other keywords, that first one looks like the only one that this search pulled up that has relevance to your topic. But that's, again, you could go back and try, art and then history. And see, we're going to get a lot of stuff from history that's not relevant. So we could go back and do art history in one field. Integrating ESL into the art history classroom. Here's another one that looks relevant. The effects of interactive multimedia on the critical writings of art history survey students. It's a doctoral thesis.
Yeah.
So linking language and content, ESL in art history, writing in art history, an instrument for teaching course content. These are going to be about how to teach art history through writing assignments. But anyways, that first one had some keywords that I thought were pretty good. So we're going to go back to that. And what you can do with those keywords is pick some of them out and search for them elsewhere, right? Okay. So you can find his article, but then you can see, like, if you pick, let's say, I would look for systemic functional linguistics. And then I'm going to go to WorldCat, which sort of okay, systemic functional linguistics. You might be able to find uh, other things here. See, comparative legal linguistics, um, functional syntax. Let's see if we can find one thing to look at, because once you get into um, okay, I don't know if this is relevant or not, but this is interesting. So I'm going to click on this just to, uh, this tells you all the different libraries that have it. WorldCat brings you to, it puts all the different libraries data collections together so you can find out where, um, so once you find it in the library through WorldCat, you can go and look at these categories that the source has been put into by librarians, see? So once you take your keywords and you find another relevant source, and this one doesn't look like it's completely relevant, but we're just taking it for example, um, then you can go look at the different subject categories that librarians have put them in. And I don't know why this brought me specifically to the Boston University Library, but I want to go to, well, I'll go back to the same article, and then let's see, multimodal discourse analysis. Now that might have some stuff that's relevant to your topic, because art historians are going to be writing using language to describe, sculptures or visual art images.
Yeah,
And
true.
so even if you find stuff that's not about directly art history, you might find stuff that has analysis of how people process an image into language. And just by clicking on the subject area that the librarians assigned to that one article, it didn't even seem to have a whole lot of relevance, direct relevance to your topic, see? And then it pulls up everything else that the librarians have categorized under that, including at the very top of the list, the article we used to get here in the first place, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's, if you write good keywords, you want to write keywords that are going to help your readers do exactly this. Now, I think we may have time for, and thank you, Natalia, for the example.
Yeah, thank you.
I think we have time for one more. Would anyone else like to share their topic? And we can do a similar keyword query. Okay, Leonel. Thank you, Leonel. Is your microphone working?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yes. Okay. So I'm working on how to improve the environment, the learning environment, how improving the learning environment has a positive impact on the learning outcome of the students.
Okay. So what kind of terms would you like to search for to find stuff what do you think would bring up something relevant to your topic? What terms?
I have thought of, first of all, like the importance of having an effective learning environment. So I would search for learning communities.
Okay. Let's try learning community. Well,
Learning learning communities.
well, we can put it in plural and see what we get. If that doesn't work, we can try singular. All right. Here we go. This seems like it brought up 9 different things. And again, compile is mostly, almost entirely oriented towards either writing studies or writing pedagogy and things like that. So, uh, it's for specifically for writing related stuff or composition related stuff. And I know a lot of you might be doing research into more language acquisition topics and things. So, but we're just, but still, I think here we have several things, and let's see, linked writing courses. Um, it's a book. Let's see. Um, it's time to end coursocentrism. This is published in Inside Higher Education, so that's probably going to be more. I don't know how. I don't think that's going to be hardcore research. I think it's going to be more of an opinion piece. Okay, here's one. Journal of Learning Communities Research. The title of the article is First Year Seminar Leaders and Learning Communities. And the abstract says, this is about, seems like it's relevant to your topic, right? And
Yeah.
the keywords are learning community, learning theory, retention, first year seminar, teacher opinion, interview, data, class discussion, linked. Now, I'd like to point out that when we looked up that art history topic, the author's keywords, by necessity, because I mean, really, it would be hard to come up with search terms for that topic, and I'm surprised we found something on it. But that author came up with keywords that had a broad range of general and specific indications, right? I mean, he had the word preposition in his keywords, and he had the word art history in there. So this one doesn't seem to have that same scope of from general to specific in terms of the choice of keywords. Although, well, data, that one's very, very broad. I mean, in fact, what it does is it makes you think that realize that the keywords need to work together as well, right? Because if you just did look for data, you would get millions of things, and most of them would have no relevance whatsoever to what you're doing. You'd be getting chemistry and epidemiology and psychology and economics and all kinds of stuff. Again, also interview, that's a real broad one. But most of these are, none of them are as specific as the ones from the art history article. And some of these are, just going to talk about the general subject area. So we've got learning community, learning theory, retention, first year seminar, teacher opinion. Which one of those keywords do you think we should use to?
I think for my research, because my research is being based upon the studies that I've done with my courses, so I think like the one that says first year seminar is a little more close to what I'm thinking of.
Okay. Now, one thing, let's see, first year seminar. All
Teacher
right.
opinion, first year seminar, learning theory, because it would be a matter of having a learning theory about, well, just how creating a community inside a certain study makes
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so I'm thinking that what we need to do with this particular set of keywords is I don't think these are very good keywords. I haven't read the article, but the problem I have with this set of keywords is that we found it by looking up learning community, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that brought us to it. So that was effective. And they give you an idea of the different concepts that are going to be blended in the article. But if you were to use them to search for other articles, some of these are so broad that um, that you're going to find a lot of stuff that's not relevant. But what is good about this set of keywords is it gives you ideas of things to pair. So I wouldn't have thought of pairing learning community and first year seminar in a search. But now that I've seen them together, I have the idea to do it. Let's see. Does this look relevant? Enhancing networking and proactive learning skills in the first year university experience through the use of wikis? That doesn't
Not
like,
really.
yeah, doesn't seem like it's very relevant. That's teaching politics is a part of a learning community. How about this one? Still deciding, working with learning communities. There, so this is going to be in the Business Communication Quarterly. These are the libraries worldwide that have it. Looks like there's a bunch of them. So what you could do is put your location in here, and then see if this article is at a library near you. But right now, let's go to the description. Okay, this one hasn't been given the list of categories. So these are places where it can be found in databases. It's in ERIC.
Yes, it's there.
So let's see. It was
Still deciding.
yeah. All right, here we go. See what we find in ERIC. Okay. Here we go. Core curriculum, first year seminars, course selection, college faculty recruitment, team teaching. You said first year seminars. That is irrelevant. Okay. And now we have a whole bunch of stuff on first year seminars, right? So again, I feel like the search terms that we got from that particular set of keywords aren't the most helpful to us, even though the article itself might be very relevant, right? So there's an example of what can happen if your keywords are going to be
Too
broad, or not enough of a blend of broad and specific, right? So very good. Well, Lionel, thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
This webinar is being recorded, by the way, so you know, you can go back and find this stuff again if you watched the video, if you didn't, if you felt like the searches we did were helpful. Okay, so before we conclude, are there any final comments or questions about abstracts and keywords? Okay, Vera.
My question is rather short and it's not exactly related to abstracts and keywords, I guess. It's about the titles. I was wondering, Dr. Eubanks, if there would be any opportunity to discuss maybe within the space of a webinar, how we write titles. It may be an issue with students who are learning to write research papers, because oftentimes what they do is, of course, trying to translate Russian titles verbatim, word for word, into English language. And the Russian titles tend to be a little more detailed than the English titles. So I was just wondering if there is any opportunity for us to learn about how to best deal with, the Russians trying to write something in English, of course, many of them translating the Russian titles into English.
Yeah,
Of course, culture specific, but I think that's an important issue, because when you coin a title in English, that's you have to go to deal. Probably you have to go to explore some strategies for doing that.
yeah, that's a good point. And I had not built a unit on titles into this course, but you're right. And I noticed that when I was teaching in Russia as well, that um, that is an actual need there. And it's probably, I mean, even native English speakers writing titles when they're students, often do need some help. And yeah, maybe in a later webinar we can um, talk about that a little bit. Right now, I can say that one sort of basic thing people do in English is they have the first part of their title as something um, kind of general, uh, such as still deciding, in quotes. If you only called your article still deciding, it wouldn't tell anybody what the article's about. But then if you look at the rest of the title, working with learning communities, then you know that the article's about learning communities. And so you have this general title and then a subtitle that specifies the subject area, but then also explains the first part of the title. So the relationship between these two things is this not only specifies the topic, but it also says something about this first part, right? And it gives you an indication of what the article might argue or what the author might be looking at. Um, yeah, Vera, another comment?
Well, yeah, basically that's what I wanted to say. Well, thank you very much for, giving us some of your feedback on that. I think that it's really important for us to see what the mechanics is in terms of, what you put into the first part of the article, because oftentimes the English articles tend to be, the English titles tend to be two-part titles. So we need to kind of have a feeling of how we approach, title
Yes,
formulation.
that's a great English titles very often have two parts. And
Mm-hmm.
there's this pattern, still deciding, working with learning communities. And then there's, look over here, workplace and flexible delivery. So two general topics. The article is most likely going to be uh, what, you know, something about how flexible delivery enhances workplace learning. Dialectical
Mm-hmm.
differences and learning disorders, okay? Archaeology and the first Americans. Okay, so it's still, these are the sort of general subject areas, and then these are the things that are going to specify what about workplace learning the article is going to argue. What is the article going to? Dialectical differences, very broad. Learning disorders. Okay, so that narrows down dialectical differences and gives you some idea. So this is the other pattern: A and B,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, and so not all of them are going to be two-part, but just look at this. And almost every one of these was a two-part, and the and A and B is one, and then title colon explanatory subtitle is another very
Mm-hmm.
uh, common one. First
Mm-hmm.
Farmers, the origins of agricultural societies. You see that title is structured the exact same way as Still Deciding, working with learning
Mm-hmm.
communities. Service learning, transforming students, communities, and universities. That's the same pattern as this one. Um, so again, not all of, if your topic is specific enough, you could do something like this. or this, where it's not a two-part title. It's, but you know, the two-part title is probably the most common way to do it. Okay, thank you, Vera, for that question. That was a good one, and maybe we can talk more about titles later when we're working on your articles. We can look at your titles and figure out, how you can teach students to write titles like that too. Okay, so any other questions or comments before we go? No, well, I'd like to thank all of you for attending the webinar, and I've enjoyed it, and I look forward to the next one. And uh, for those of you in Russia, have a nice evening, and those of you over on this half of the globe, have a nice day. And I'll look forward to also reading some more of your drafts in the workshops. Goodbye.